So the next kind of thing we're going to go into is we're going to head back to Yosemite, and we're going to watch a video on the Yosemite shoot. Oh, do you have one? Sorry, I thought you raised your hand. On the Yosemite shoot in the morning, which is basically just sunrise. And in this segment, I kind of go over some of the details of like where we're shooting, why we're shooting it, what is our subject? Well, the subject for me is really the place, right? And this is kind of a concept that ties back into this idea of editorial and shooting things, I guess, on spec. So when I started to shoot a lot of stuff for magazines, I realized something pretty quickly, and it was a great piece of advice that one of my photo editors told me, and he said, I have photographs of every surfer, all the best waves in the world doing every maneuver, because they have a tour, that goes to all these amazing waves. He's like, I have those images. He said, when you send me a story or an article of a place, you traveled somewhere, maybe you traveled to Big Sur or wherever it went. He said, if I can't identify that it's that location, why would I run it? Why would I print it? Because basically I want to have a sense of place, a sense of scale in my images, right? So when I'm shooting on spec and I'm going to somewhere like Yosemite, for example, and I use Yosemite as kind of my hero location, that's where we went to because I love it, because it's easy to shoot, and I really wanted a fun place that offered a lot of variety. You have rivers, you have steep peaks, you have really cool overviews, you have amazing star trails, you have tons of stuff you can shoot, and it's just fun. And so when I go to a place like that, I'm always aiming to shoot photographs that people are going to see and recognize. Oh wow, that's Yosemite, but that's a new perspective I haven't really quite seen before, right? Or wow, that's an amazing place that I can tell kind of where it is in a way. I think that, it depends on obviously what your assignment is, but my background comes from creating these sort of editorial pieces, like a feature, right? If I'm doing a feature on, surfing in India, well, I want to have aspects of India fused into the images. And just to kind of go over some of these photographs here, this is Japan, right? So I wanted to have an aspect of the landscape that really tied in to that image, to the location that we went. This is Morro Bay, an image of Morro Rock in the background with a perfect left kind of peeling off, right? And this is obviously, if somebody would have taken this and framed right, maybe 5 or 6 inches, I'd want to strangle them because you're missing out on the best part of the photograph. It's not so much the wave, it's the fact that Morro Rock is sitting right there. It's this huge, amazing feature, It's what makes it interesting. It's the landscape here that makes this unique. It's what makes it interesting. It's this amazing, Lake Moraine, skyline that and the water and all the textures of that make it unique, right? So if I was shooting an assignment for a place or location, I'd want to fuse in aspects of that. If somebody just framed in on this like that, it would really be a massive disservice to the world of creativity, I think. But you'd be surprised, some people they don't quite see it like that, So again, like if your assignment was shooting horseback riding in Utah, or Arizona, whatever, and you wanted to find something that was iconically that place, iconically Monument Valley, but fuse in this other element of what you had to shoot, this would be a way you could do it, and once again, thinking editorially, giving your photographs room to breathe, okay? How important is that? Can't express it enough, right? We're not just thinking about square crops here, you guys. We're thinking about photographs that could be split down the middle as a spread, photographs that have enough room for sky. You're thinking with the idea and the eyes of a designer, an editor, a journalist, and all these things. And this is the editorial process, okay? This is understanding and knowing what it is magazines need and want, and also sending them variations. So when I'd go to a place like this, I would shoot this as many ways and as many variations and as many crops as I can. And although you might be seeing this one photograph, that doesn't mean there's not 1,000 others that are usable, right? Now, the concept there is just to siphon down the important ones to what you want to send and what I ideally give the best image of the place, right? Go ahead. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I just had a question. Yeah. We touched on this in Yosemite and quite a bit, but we talked about researching elements of the image that you want to capture beforehand and really diving into not just the cultural of it, but really how you want to capture that. Mm-hmm. When you're approaching an assignment all these assignments you're showing us, how does that play into how you're shooting it?
Well, that's a really good question, and I'm glad you asked it because I get this a lot. Like, what do you do before a trip? How do you concept? Well, this is a perfect example, and this is kind of why I put this slideshow together, because it's a mixture of images I've saw on assignment, for personal work, for commercial work, and everything in between, right? So this photograph, for example, Lake Meline in Jasper National Park in Alberta, right? I was on assignment for Alberta Tourism, doing a social media campaign, right? And before I went there, right, my job was to basically show how beautiful this location was. Super simple assignment, just take cool pictures and post them. It's like the dream jobs, right? These are the fun ones. Now, before I go to a place, I like to research as much as I can without killing the mystery of it. And now I say this because everybody knows how strong of a tool Google is, and if you don't know how to use Google, then I don't know, there's no help for you. But I suggest, looking into these locations, understanding where you're going, understanding the kind of what's available and the beauty of the place, and how it can work for you. It changes everything. It changes what equipment you bring, changes what the weather is. You start to know and see, okay, cool. I researched all of Alberta. I saw photos of Meline Lake. I'm like, I want to get out there. What do I need? I need a dry bag because I'm going to kayak out there. I need this, I need that. I brought my camping gear. I brought this and that. So I set myself up to create images at this place. And I also researched what are some of the coolest angles. So before I went there, I wasn't just running around like a chicken with my head cut off. I kind of knew like, wow, this is a rad spot. This is a rad place to shoot. Now, the best angle that you see online is really this one right here, which is like a no-brainer. It's easy. You just walk up this little hill, you take the photo, it's awesome. What made our image different is that you can't get here by riding a tourist bus or riding a tourist boat. You have to kayak about 4 hours out there and stay the night to get sunset. And it's legal to do, you just have to set yourself up for it, right? So I planned that ahead of time. If you were just like, I'm going there, it's all gonna be a mystery to me, woohoo, you aren't gonna get that shot, right? This is the difference between being a professional and actually just kind of going with the flow. Now, there's an element of going with the flow that is super important, and this is where kind of this difference is that, when shooting a photograph like this was early in the morning, right? We woke up and we saw this amazing reflection on the lake, and right before we were about to paddle out, I was like, hey, come over here, I want to grab this shot, because I saw my friend starting to leave, and he circled back, he waited. I'm standing on a dock, right? He waited for the water to get calm, and I just pushed him off so that he could make this really beautiful trail, and then he just did a couple strokes, and I took that photograph, right? Now, this is not a photo that I saw before I got there. I didn't even know this reflection existed, or that it looked like this from this perspective. So I made myself available for those kind of moments to happen, right? And I think that's the mixture. When I go on a trip, you plan things out, right? As a landscape photographer, as an adventure photographer, as action sports, whatever you want to call it, so much of what happens is uncontrollable moments, which are great to be ready for. But the more you can conceptualize beforehand, the better you're going to be. Guess.
So you said that it's important to be able to use the internet and Google. Do you look at other people's pictures of that place before going to that place if you've never been there before?
Occasionally I do, but that's kind of the hard part is like, I try to a point. I don't want to like kill it for myself. You want there to be some beauty, and if you spend too much time just researching, it's like, I kind of just know like, these are the great locations, these are some of the cool perspectives, and I'm done. What do I need to get there? What do I need to get that shot? Or what do I need to get kind of this angle? Well, and then I know, but I don't want to overdo it. I don't want to do it to the point where the mystery is gone, and when I'm there, I'm just kind of like, I feel like I'm just copying someone else's work. I mean, that's really important to do, is to kind of know, research, but then also leave that room for those moments to just happen, right? And then that's kind of the beauty, is that it's taking this idea of like, you're in nature. Landscape photography is all about kind of these moments that just happen to us, right? You get a sunset, you get a sunrise, but also infusing some sort of aspect where it feels like, you've conceptualized it, right? So, for example, this. There was not just a horse there. I went out to Monument Valley, driving back from doing a commercial shoot, and I was like, I've always wanted to shoot Monument Valley. We shot the stars, we shot the sunset, the whole thing. It was epic. Loved it. The next morning, that night, it was like 9 p.m., and I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to do a horse ride through the valley. So I hired a guide. And I was like, hey, I really just want to take pictures of you and the other guys I'm with riding around. So we rode around, we took pictures, he took us on some trails, and I found this plateau before sunrise. It was like 6 a.m. and it was freezing out. And I was like, hey, would you mind riding up there a couple times? And he did that, and then we went on, right? So I conceptualized that image, that shot, that concept, right? It wasn't just, and I'm not trying to kill the mystery for you guys. I hope that like it's not as special to you because you know that, but I mean, it doesn't really make a difference. I mean, 90% of the photographs you see that are well done are the ones that have been conceptualized and planned out, but look as if they weren't. That's the point, right? So same thing with this. This is a photograph. I wish you could see it on that screen, because it looks a lot more vibrant with half dome and everything, but I have shot this road like 30 times, right? And taking pictures of it, and one trip I went up there and I went up there like on this specific trip and had a skateboard with me, and we were skateboarding on this road, and I took a photo of my friend and I was like, this is epic. I was like, but I really need somebody who can skate well. So we called a buddy, he came out there and met us, right? And I was like, I was conceptualizing what I wanted, right? And basically he came up, I threw him in a t-shirt. I've done a lot of kind of spec work for Patagonia, so I was like, oh, they might dig this. I had him in a couple different outfits and I shot this, right? So it was a moment that just happened. I saw it, and then I was like, what can I do to make it better? And Outside Magazine ended up picking this up for a like full page, or for a spread, or for a full page, I forget. But that's an example of like shooting on spec and then having it being used later. And I know that if I just would have submitted the original photos from what me and my friend were skateboarding, it wouldn't have been as cool, right? It needed some color, it needed some, it needed some elements to it. And yeah, so it's kind of one of those things where you're trying to think like a studio photographer in a way. This is the beauty of like skateboarding and a lot of these other kind of action sports things, that they have the ability to set up whatever they want, lights and strobes and do all that stuff. Once again, a moment that I could never plan to happen. I planned the framing, I saw the location, planned how I wanted it to be framed, but actually having the surfer and the waves and everything line up, that's something that just happened all of a sudden. So being ready for that, okay? Does that kind of concept make sense to you guys a bit? Like this idea of having an idea, executing, traveling and planning it out, but also leaving room for just the amazing moments to happen? Yeah.
You may get to this later, but if you plan for like a brand or somebody that you might want to work with, but you don't have a relationship with them already, do you find that it's easy to approach someone if you have some cool pictures, maybe with that brand, like you had the Patagonia brand tucked in there?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have done that if I hadn't worked with them before, but just in that scenario, I wouldn't have. But it doesn't mean that if like I was trying to work with somebody else or submit photos, I think that would be a great idea or concept to do, for sure. Like always good, you definitely wouldn't want to send photos to a competitive brand of somebody wearing their competitor's gear, you know what I mean? Like, so it definitely would make sense. This is kind of why a lot of times when you're thinking about stock imagery or selling images out in the stock market, the more like no logo, no whatever, basic colors, the better, right? Because then it's just everybody, it applies to everybody. You have a basic red t-shirt or yellow or, a nondescript yellow backpack. It's gonna be really easy to get that one off the market, as opposed to like something that is just, blaring with logos and says this and that, Patagonia or whoever. That's only really gonna apply to like maybe them. One more example, really quick. Yes?
You might touch on this later, but are you gonna talk about, strobes, studio lights outside, anything like that? Do you do any of that type
I
of
hate
work?
that stuff, just for my own work. I hate it only because I don't know how to do it, and it's just a nightmare. It's a headache. I find that if I did that, it would make my work days like 20-hour days instead of 18-hour days, because I'm already trying to shoot at night and when the sun's good and stuff. And this is one of those things, I used to shoot with a lot of strobes. I used to shoot with like 3 to 4 strobes in the water and do a lot of stuff with surfing, and I took that out of my portfolio because it's really simple. I knew that my best work was all about natural light and celebrating natural light and pushing it to the limit of what I can. And so I feel like it in a way, it kind of hurt my other work. And I also have been very, and this is something I suggest for everybody, don't put work out into the world that you don't want to bring back. And if you don't like shooting weddings, don't put wedding photography out there. I mean, obviously you might have to, because that might be your bread and butter, but just consider, what you're putting out in the world and how that's gonna come back to you. So for me, it was like I want to put all my strobe work out there, my flash portraiture stuff when I know it's not my strongest, and it's also not something I really dig doing. I'd much rather just find an amazing landscape and kind of shoot like that. So I just feel like in a way, it's about putting your best foot forward and projecting out into the world what you hope to bring back. That's what people are seeing, so that's all they have to base your work off of.
Cool. Thank you.
So last thing I want to talk about before we kind of dive into this Yosemite section. This is on that trip to Alberta too. And basically, this is Athabasca Canyon, amazing place. We showed up here, right? I'm just gonna run you through the entire thing. We showed up here, it was like a 10-day trip, right? So we're shooting all these locations. I showed up here the night before and I was like, this place is incredible. I'm like, this place needs a kayaker or someone in there. Like the first thing I thought of was like, you need someone in this shot, leading to, it looks too amazing to explore. And as I arrived there, I was like, you guys should flip that screen around because it's so much cooler on that little screen to look at, so you can really get a feel for how the image is. But when I saw this whole place, I was like, you know what this place needs? It needs cloudy skies with a polarizer and a subject in there. And so I made a couple calls, called a friend in Jasper, the town just north. I was like, hey, do you know any kayakers who'd love to do this? He's like, yeah. He's like, there's one of the best guys. I was like, does he have a yellow kayak? Yeah, he does. I'm like, perfect. So why wouldn't I want a blue one? Well, you'd probably get lost in the water. You want that color that's gonna pop, right? And so the guy was really cool, epic kayaker. We came back the next day. I wanted cloudy skies because with cloudy skies, it's gonna be a more even gradient, and the polarizer is gonna cut the reflection of the water a lot easier than if you have dark shadows coming down from the canyon, right? So I came to this bridge, same spot I came before, and I shot it vertically, and I shot it horizontal, and I shot it, cropped in, and every different perspective, right? So here's your normal horizontal perspective, right? And I shot both these because immediately I knew, I was like, this could be a cover. And I've never shot kayaking, and I've never, it's not something I've ever really dived into before prior to this moment. But I saw it, and I was like, this could be a cover. And as soon as we got back, we submitted the photos of canoe and kayak, and it was a cover. The thing is, I could see on a design scale how there could be text up top, how the person's just leading to something amazing. The colors are popping. It felt and looked like that. Now, I also shot all these variations because I didn't know what they might want to use. They might want something like this that's less, less wide angle, a little more straight lines. But I shot tons of variations, you guys. And I just want to show, in every scenario, if you're walking up to something like this and you're only shooting one perspective, I'm going to strangle you. You have to shoot as many as you can. I was down on the canyon looking back and all over. I shot this as many places as I could. And luckily I had this little moment to scout it out, the night before. So I kind of knew what worked, right? And this is one of those instances where I came there, I just saw it before me, shot it. It's awesome. It would have been a great image without him there, But I was like, what could elevate this scene? What could make this that much better, right? Because one thing that happens is sometimes, I don't know about you guys, but you get so in awe of beauty when you're there that you kind of forget does this need anything else? You're at the beach, the sunset, it's incredible, you're just firing away blindly, but sometimes we forget what could make this photo just that much better, right? And so that's kind of what we're constantly trying to think about and consider is what could elevate this scene. And so this is an example of something, also too, that was it was kind of a social media assignment actually that turned into an editorial assignment because I shot the images, submitted them. But just considering what the magazine might need is important. So I just wanted to kind of keep continuing and finishing on this little rant about my career and how it evolved. So where we left off, you guys, I was shooting a lot of editorial for surf magazines and for any magazines I could. And editorial, why is it important? I think you asked this question over at lunch, and I purposely wanted to wait because it's a good question, and I want to make sure that we answer it to everybody. But why do we shoot editorial? What did we establish already? The pay sucks, usually. It's not very good unless you're shooting for an amazing, massive magazine. But when I was doing it a lot, it wasn't for those great magazines. The pay wasn't great. And it's not really a sustainable way to kind of make a living, I found, shooting what I was shooting. So why would I continue doing it?
The love.
The love. The love is one of them, but the love doesn't put food in your mouth. Doesn't pay your exposure, right? exposure, because editorial has a massive amount of exposure, right? You have magazines that have circulations of 300, 400,000. It's the reputability. It's because it looks good, because it's so rad to have a spread, you know. And there's this fine line, you guys, between doing things for what you love, and doing things for this. But for me, it's usually what I love is shooting personal projects, you know, things that don't have any editorial value. They're just for me. So I kept doing editorial because I loved it. But what I realized really quickly was it's the commercial work that paid the bills, or that made the career keep elevating, right? And so from shooting editorial projects, I was able to go on a lot of trips with surfers and athletes, and those athletes or surfers or whoever had sponsors, right? And so those sponsors would need images. So all of a sudden now I wasn't just shooting on spec for magazines, but I was actually working for a magazine or working with a magazine pretty in line. And so I was submitting an assignment, you know, they were signing off. Great, go ahead, go to India. Can't wait to see what you get. Go to Iceland, see what you get. Awesome. I was going there. I was coming back. I was traveling with a group of surfers or a group of athletes. They had sponsors that had needs. They had images of them. So a 2-page, I mean, this is just a very, very rough, you know, interpretation, but like a 2-page spread in a magazine that might pay you $250. If that same image was bought by an advertiser and then they ran a 2-page spread in the magazine, you might make like, I don't know, $1,400 to $2,500 in the surf world, right? Every market is different, keep that in mind. So totally different though. Your name might not be on it, it'd have their logos on it. It's not as clean and pure and all those things, but geez, I mean, that's like 8 times the money or something like that. I don't know, but that's how you kind of made, at least I made money in that regard. And so what happened was, you know, was working for Surfline and Water Magazine, ended up getting a job at Surfer Magazine when the editors changed over. And so I was working at staff for Surfer Magazine, which is who I'm working for now. And all these trips I've been going on, the photographs were getting used for different purposes. You know, they were getting used for the magazine, of course, and they were getting used for these awesome features, but I was able to sell them for advertisements here, advertisements there, and all of a sudden then you're going on trips with sponsors or with brands, like say, I don't know, the Quicksilvers, Billabongs, Rukas of the world, whatever, and doing campaigns for them, right? So none of the images are being used in editorial, they're just being used for commercial use, okay? And the rates for those would be much, much higher. Now, keep in mind, this is the same with any company, brand, any sport. I don't care if you're shooting, you know, competitive rollerblading. It's essentially works the same way, right? The advertisers pay, you know, for the ads in the magazine. Now, if you're shooting a lot of editorial and you have a really good name for yourself, and you're proven as somebody who can, you know, travel with athletes or whoever and get them good exposure, that's good for 2 things. It's good for the brand, first of all, because they are realizing, wow, this guy's super valuable. He can go and get us free advertising, right? If you have editorial of someone with the brand's logo on it, that's free advertising for them, okay? Because they aren't paying for it, right? It's just in the magazine. It looks good to the advertisers, so they're really keen to work with you usually. Also, the athletes are really keen to work with you, or your subject is really keen to work. And this is the same if you're working with models or something too. It doesn't matter. Like, you're promoting them, they're promoting you. It's kind of works back and forth, right? So, but anyway, this is kind of what I was doing for a good number of years. And that was really my bread and butter was shooting a lot of editorial. I had a little print stuff on the side, okay? But what started happening was I was getting a lot more recognition from maybe some larger commercial clients. Clients that weren't in the surf world, weren't in the action sports world at all, you know? Wine labels and, you know, random, you know, outerwear brands and car companies and this and that. And they said, you know, we love the way that you've been able to document California surf culture and surf culture in general. We have a project that we could use your expertise and we could use your eye and your vision on. Great. So now all of a sudden my work started to shift. And what I started to do, and this is so, I think, important and fitting to this classroom. 2 things, okay? First of all, there came a point in my career where I was like, you know what, I'm to that point, I've got a little bit of money saved up. I want to invest in myself. So I want to invest in my own portfolio, my own career. And up till now, up to the last couple of years, what has been probably the best way to get your work in front of editors and in front of, you know, new potential clients or whatever? Does anybody have an An idea?
Social media.
Up until 5 years ago.
Email, 10 friends or so.
Yeah. What do you know what that's called? What they used to be called? Like when you send like a
Portfolio.
send a portfolio, or you send something, because you're not really sending them a book, right? Usually promo mailers. People would spend a couple $1,000s sending promo mailers. So it might be 10 small prints. It might be a little card with your contact info and a really good image. That's what photographers would do.
Like a sponsor me skate video.
Uh,
The best
yeah,
skater.
yeah, in a very rudimentary way, but a lot different too. It'd be like, me basically making, I don't know, something small like this and printing out 2,000 copies. I mean, it would be expensive. You'd send it to all the magazines and all the prospective clients you guys want to work with. Now, one thing I want you guys to do tonight, write down a list of 5 clients that you would love to work with. 5 commercial clients, right? I'm talking like the Levi's, the Toyotas, the whoever's of the world. Write down that list, okay? Make it a realistic list, a list of people that you could actually see yourself working with. How would you align with them? How would that work, okay? Now, to get back to what I decided to do, rather than do this, with the onset of social media, I realized something, I would rather put some of my best work out there online. Work that I know and that I'm comfortable with potentially being redistributed, potentially stolen, used on someone's website, blah, blah, blah. But if I know that it's getting reshared and it's getting out in the world, I know there's gonna be value there. So I invested in myself. The money that I might have made not putting it out there and trying to sell it, I'm willing to lose because I know that it's going to go out there and work for me, right? So that's exactly what I did. I started using social media as a tool to market myself. I decided to minimize my watermarks. I decided to put A+ work out there. Work that I potentially could have distributed and sold and done this and that. Maybe work that I could have sold for stock and might have made me a couple $100s. I invested in myself. And I was willing to do that because I knew the power of social media and I could see what it was doing. And so because of that, it is something that really started to, I feel like, benefit myself in the long run, because the clients were seeing this, people were seeing this work, and it was getting redistributed, it was getting out there into the world. In a time when I was going into these offices of editors and looking at their desks and seeing stacks of promo mailers just being pushed off to the corner, nobody's looking at that stuff, Where were people looking? They were looking on their phones. They were looking on Facebook. They were looking at stuff they were shared in, right? So trying to kind of emerge with this new market and accept it and see how I could work with it. Does this kind of make sense? Do you guys have understanding for that?
When did you start to do that?
I would say about 5 years ago.
5 years ago.
When Facebook was kind of like taking off, Nowadays we have like 160,000 or 170,000 Facebook followers or something like that. And, because we're putting a lot of energy into that channel, obviously, and other channels have grown too. What is the other thing I've done? Well, this falls right in line with this concept of trying to define yourself. It's 3 things. I found myself shooting more commercial work, and I was going to these amazing locations, right? I was already traveling there for surf and other things. So you have to understand, just like with those things that I told you guys, you got to stick to what you're really good at, but also working on things on the side, I knew that at this point, early in my career, if I was to show you my portfolio, it wouldn't have photos of people kayaking and photos of cars and things like that in there, because I'd never shot that stuff, So my work of it sucked. Why would I put that in front of you if I wasn't comfortable, if I knew that? So what I realized, what was on my list, maybe it was Toyota, which is a brand I work for all the time now. That would have been a list, somebody on my list. So what did I do to get myself closer to working with them? Well, it's simple. I knew, first of all, that I needed a portfolio that would resonate with them. I needed a portfolio that would actually show images of me working with vehicles. I was going to these amazing locations already, but I was usually driving like some crappy minivan or some weird sedan or some funky little, 4-door car, So I was going to Iceland, and I'm like, you know what? I need to start building my portfolio of amazing vehicle shots in these landscapes. I want to shoot vehicles in the same way that I would shoot surfers. The thing that's built my name up, I want to apply the same type of treatment to that. Do you see any similarities here of how there might be a vehicle infused in that same aesthetic, right? So going to Russia, going to Iceland, going to these places, I started investing into myself. I started renting a more expensive car that I was just paying for because I knew that this, Defender 110 would look way cooler in images than this crappy minivan, right? And I started shooting it along the way. And by doing that, I created a portfolio for myself, right? This was all spec work. I didn't sell any of these images. They weren't used for anything other than just having a portfolio that I knew that opportunity came along, I could have something to put forward, right? And so that was kind of the goal. And what has that translated to? Well, as you can see, we have, projects like in Big Sur going up and shooting there. Well, what's that translated to? Well, it's translated to, here's some more. These are just photographs that I shot on spec. This is in Norway, right? Shooting some vehicles there. This is in Iceland, right? Shooting some vehicles there. More Iceland stuff, shooting vehicles there. So I was investing in myself, into something that I knew. I love shooting surfing, but I was like, I want to shoot something more, I want to work with bigger clients, that could ideally take me to different places and work on rad stuff. And so I basically was able to start getting, noticed by some of these brands and start doing work for them. So this is a really small selection of work that I've done for Toyota and whatnot as well. Now, this last element of investing in myself. So considering this idea of building your career, making things more specific to you, I realized pretty early on, that for me, location played a big part in things, right? And I was always receiving tons of scrutiny because I wasn't traveling to Hawaii every winter, shooting, these 3 to 4 weeks on the North Shore. And I think a big part of it was just because I grew up around cold water and I loved kind of more rugged places with no people. That's where I felt the most comfortable. But more importantly than that, I didn't see any need to go compete with people when I could go to places that nobody else was going, right? So let's consider this. Has any of you guys been to Hawaii to shoot there for any reason? Like shoot surfing for any reason like that? Okay, good. So I'm not gonna bum anybody out, but think about this. You go to Hawaii, you're there. You are there. You're paying your own way because you're not working for a magazine. You're not working for a brand. You're just going there, which is something a lot of people do when they're shooting surfing, right? It's like kind of the thing, because all the athletes are there, all the contests are there. It's a great place to see the best surfing happening, like literally hundreds of feet in front of you. But when you go there and something amazing happens, who are you competing with? You're competing with all the staff photographers at the magazine that are being paid a salary, where even if your angle is a little bit better, they'd probably go with them because they're paying those guys. You're competing with all the brand photographers who are hired by the brand to shoot images of their guys, so you're probably not going to sell any photos to the brand. What you're going to end up doing maybe is selling a photo to like a website or something like that that's going to pay you very little, and you're going to have a very, very hard time recouping money from that trip. So the hardest part about this is that it's not really a sustainable cycle, right? Maybe you go to try and sell print sales of it. Well, that's going to be a really tough thing to do too. So for me, I realized pretty clearly that I needed to find a different plan. And what I started to do is travel to places that felt more rugged, more remote, more distant. And this is really what got me involved and excited about shooting in the Arctic and shooting surfing in super remote places, right? And I've been to Iceland 18 times, and Norway multiple times, and Russia twice, and yada, yada, yada. And that's all fine and good, but in the beginning, it was really just about going there because I had a general interest. So one of the ways I tried to set my work apart was by going to these locations, right? And going to places that I hadn't seen images of before. Nowadays, there's tons of stuff of this, online. But 10 years ago, when I started traveling there, there wasn't a lot of people going there. So that was one of the ways that I tried to set kind of my work apart. And it really helped in defining that style. It's obviously, not to dumb down my work, but it's a lot easier to create great images of places that you've never really seen other people shoot, or you're not competing with other people shooting there in this market, in this field, right? So before we play this Yosemite video, I just want to make sure do those kind of 3 concepts in terms of defining your style and making your career stand apart, do those make sense? You guys have questions on those things?
Would you still recommend that approach for somebody today? You said you started doing this 10 years ago. When
Absolutely. The world's a big place, and there's so much to see and discover and do. And I mean, I can't imagine I know that I have a list of like tons of places that I would love to go to, that I still want to go to. And that's the beauty, is that there's so much out there to still explore and see and do. Now, obviously taking, a path it's just about really taking a path that's less conventional, right? And taking a path that feels a bit more true to what inspires you, and this is what inspired me, and this is what I felt drawn to. If you're drawn to do the same route that other people have done, that's fine too. I just think it's going to be a bit harder. You're going to throw yourself into a lot bigger pool of fish,
But if you want to transcend that, you need to create your own path, is what you're saying.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, so with the likes of, the surfer trips to Iceland, is that something that you would invest in yourself to then go and sell as pictures, or is that something that surfer pays for to go and do that trip?
I've done it both ways. I've been there on
yeah.
assignment for people. I've done commercial projects. I've paid 100% for myself to go. I've paid a lot of trips where I've paid everything up front and then just made my money back later. And I think the key is, once you've done it enough, the trips that are going to be super valuable, and I'm like, great, I'm willing to invest all my money into this one because I know it's going to pay off and be awesome. But in the beginning, it's obviously really tough to just make those initial investments, right?
Yeah.
That's why I think having a great idea and a great concept goes a long way. It's not just like, I'm going to go there and create, great images and push them out. It's like, what's the value? I'm going to go there. I'm going to put images away from my portfolio. I'm going to create images for stock. I'm going to create a good editorial assignment. I have some ideas of how I might be able to shoot some video. I have some ideas of how I might be able to shoot some, stuff for social media. Like, nowadays, there's so many factors that go into play of what you can get out of it. But the main value might not be the monetary compensation.
Yeah.
If I go somewhere, at least for me now, if I go somewhere and I'm like, I'm not going to make any money, but I know that I'm going to create great images that are going to have a good social impact, that's value too, right? So thinking about it on all those levels, right? And personal value, of course, like going there and having a good time is
and if you
maybe important too.
And if you extend that a step further, so let's just say it wasn't funded by the magazine, and you're taking these athletes, I guess it's around the athlete management perspective. Are you putting that investment in for those athletes, or would they be putting that in?
No, everybody needs to invest equally.
Yeah,
You're not fronting the bill for anything because they're benefiting too, right?
And that's, I guess, who's getting the value, and if that value
Well,
shared,
they're getting the value if they're getting an editorial thing, because that's free advertising for them. It builds their name, builds their sponsor's name, which ideally they should be pitching in for, or the sponsor should.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree with that. I was just trying to figure out, there must be a balance there somewhere that.
There totally is, man. It's all about weaving a balance and making
Absolutely.
sense. In a lot of ways, you can minimize the expenses on these trips is getting support for tourism.
Yeah, sounds like surfing's the same as wakeboarding.
Same, it's all the same. Doesn't matter if you're shooting, competitive ballet. It's like, it's all the same, so.
I don't know, it's partly what it was answered. When you were taking pictures, for example, just for yourself and putting them online, you were just like putting them online and waiting for a client to come, or you were also sending like to Toyota? Or
I'm just putting work out in the world that I know is going to get a good engagement.
Yeah, no, I mean just
and hoping that the right people are going to see it, and that's just, it's a luck of the draw. You're just hoping and praying that it's going to get to the right people, and that your work is going to seed out there. And if you're shooting stuff that's interesting enough, or you have a good eye. That's the one thing you can't help people with. Is you can't help people. You can talk about it all day, but you can't help people necessarily decipher what about an image makes it compelling. All these aspects of what we're talking about: leading lines, compelling light, yada 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 yada, three-dimensional, this, that. Those are all things that are going to apply. But I think that if you start shooting work that feels consistent, it's all going to start coming back to you. Which is great. Yes.
So you did and you're doing still a lot of editorial, and clearly you're doing a lot of commercial work. What part selling prints has today for you? And also if in the past or right now you're working or you want to work with galleries that eventually, it's more your personal work that will come out and your personal point of view and not the company or...
We're going to talk about that, I think, after this video. The selling prints aspect is a huge part of my business now. It's only grown because of social media, right? Because I'm able to, it's a really great tool to dictate which images would be good as print sales. Well, more people that engage with a photo probably means more people are going to buy it, right? I mean, if you're I mean, and you have to understand, like, I always hate looking at this from the monetary perspective, but if you're making a gallery just to put your own image in there, which you like, I don't know what to tell you. You're really well off, because the point of a gallery is to sell work, right? And the point to sell work is to make money and sustain that gallery and make business that works. So for me, using social media as a way to determine which images are going to do well, which images are going to be engaging and print well, that's a really good model. It's a great way to dictate what to print and what to do, you know? If I have a photograph that does extremely well, I'm going to want to print that one up and sell it, you know? So that's just kind of my concept on that. You know, there's, I'll talk more about print sales in a little bit too, and with galleries as well, and how to kind of dictate a show or something like that.